All right, guys, so today we're talking about the X6M. Now, this car seems to be, as far as I could tell, one of the cheapest M cars you could get, which is funny because it was also one of the most expensive ones new. And so this is S63, 2012 model, and this thing has, I think, 567 horsepower in this year in this fashion on the E71 chassis, which is the X6 chassis. And so instead of N63 or S63 TU, it's only a 63, regular S63. A little bit less horsepower, but still a extreme amount. I think the new ones were like 620 horsepower with the same engine variant and so forth. But it kind of has a mixed personality here because it's like an in-betweener M car. It has the M engine, all the M seats, but then again, it's an SUV and it's big and it's heavy and it's bulky. Now, remember my E60 M5, it was kind of the same way. It was kind of a really big car. And if you threw in many corners, corner after corner, the brakes would get hot. It was big and kind of loafy feeling. And we kind of see that same thing with the G-Wagon. G-Wagon's even worse. And you really got to be careful. We have not got to drive this thing yet. We'll be pulling the engine out, probably start that this evening yet. And we'll definitely get all in through this thing. But as you can see here, let's see if you can see. I don't know if we're on the lift here. I'm trying to sort out how we could even do this. Let's go under the hood first. I have to walk right in front of the camera. And he has all the covers off of this. So this is the first year they had the turbos up in the valley. The intakes were down the side, so everything's backwards. However, that does make this a lot easier to work on the car. At first glance, it looks very complex, but it's really not that bad. And it should be very interesting to get this thing on the engine stand and take it apart. Now, if you have a later year S63 or N63 and you think you're going to get around the rod bearing problem, you're not. They upgraded some stuff. It was a little bit better. You still need to do the rod bearings or you're going to be in this situation really, really quick. But as far as the X6 goes, it does have a very, let's say, maybe undesirable swoop to the back of the whole chassis, to the car. A lot of people are into this, but what that does do, that does cut out, I'm gonna grab this light over here, it does cut out a lot of the rear seat space. And to some of you with kids, that might be a deal breaker. You can see it has the stuff in there, but it's, there's not a lot of, I would say it's like maybe E90, four-door E90 rear seat space, I would say. But it is a very large car. You have factory 20-inch wheels on the M series with, it was like 315 35s on it or something totally just insane. So it is a very interesting operation. Now, you're still gonna have all of your control arm issues about 100K as this one's starting to show some wear on those. One thing we did notice by looking at this car, it is the plastic car. Everything's plastic, the hood, the fenders are all plastic, which, I mean, I assume the standard X6 is all the same way, even though the M version has different fenders, has different side skirt flares, different bumpers, different mirrors, different a lot of stuff, as most M cars have. Is a standard one plastic? I'd venture to say it probably is. I'm probably definitely trying to save some weight on these cars everywhere they could. As you can see up in here, a lot of the big bracing is all aluminum, depends on where you're from. All the big bracing on the rear, going from the strut tower like the E60 has. And this is, to some way, the E71 is a variant of the E60 if you look at the inside. Because an E70 is basically SUV version of the E60. And E71 apparently has not tracked much off of that. I can see in the fenders over here, there is no inner fender well. It's just all open. I'll grab a light. It's all open all the way back into here. And you can put your hand all the way into the outer plastic fender, which is a little bit on the bizarre side, I would say. They do carry over a lot of stuff similar to the E60, the way the radiator is kind of set up. They got two different reservoirs, one to cool the turbos and intercoolers, one for the engine. The same old, actually I never even checked this, the same old type reservoir. Let's see if anybody's replaced the cap on this bad boy. Somebody has replaced it. Usually they break that ledge off and it starts leaking out of the cap. That could cause an overheat problem too. It is running a little different style power steering pump reservoir, a CHF 11S. I can't even get that off. Barely any on the dipstick. My thoughts of this car are, it's just basically had nothing ever done to it. It wasn't neglected per se. It just never had any maintenance done. And you see that a lot. This car did come from Chicago. It's like the land of no maintenance up there because everything costs so much to do anything and nobody just does anything. And then you end up with this. If you're gonna buy one of these that didn't have a problem, I really wouldn't be that scared to buy one of these. However, if you bought one of these that ran totally fine, let's say it had 80,000 miles on it, you would have to do the rod bearings. The only way this is gonna be reliable is if you did the rod bearings. There's no scenario, no matter what year an S63 is, to not do the bearings at 80, 85, 90,000 miles. That's even waiting pretty long. Any of these M cars that have that problem, that'll save you $8, $10, $12, $15,000 by spending $1,000 or $2,000 now, and instead of that much later on. It really is bizarre. As far as all-wheel drive system on these, this has the same X-Drive system almost all the BMW stuff has. As we know for a fact, in snow and wet weather, is a very superior system. Now, it is all down to tires though, with 20-inch wheels and 305 or 315s on the rear. Monster tires. It all depends on what brand the tires are, what tread pattern. These are not a real aggressive tread pattern. They're like a really mild, all-season / high performance, like in between everything. Not good at one thing, not bad at anything, just like in the middle, right? So if you took out and you got caught in some sleet or ice with this thing, with these tires on it, you might be all right. It would be probably pretty twitchy on you. Engine makes enough power to where you have a little trouble regulating, only pushing on the accelerator so hard before it's spinning accidentally. And we see that with the G-Wagon too. The G-Wagon's was like raging right at the top of the pedal, so it's hard to control what's happening. But you can drive it in comfort mode, and you can kind of dumb it down a little bit like that. But in sport mode, on icy, snowy roads, probably not a real good idea. But overall, do I like the X6? The X6 is appealing because of the cost of it. Comparable X5M, it's pretty comparable X5M this year. They're about mid-20s, I would say. This is low 20s. M5 this year, they could be as high as 30, 35, depends on what configuration is, what mileage is on it, what maintenance has been done. Here's the trick of it though. If you try to sell one of these without the maintenance done, without the rod bearing, without the sheet showing who did the rod bearings, what parts, what rod bearings, what bolts they put in it, without that, I think it'd be impossible to sell one of these cars. I really do. It's necessary if somebody had no idea what they were doing, but then it's going to blow up on them and then they're going to be coming back on you anyway. So we talked to the owner about this car. I said, look, man, we're ready to start on it. Are you sure? Are you sure you want to do this? Because financially, it does not make sense from where he's at, when it's going to cost to do it. But I think he's more interested to be able to drive the car. He was really into the car itself. And so in that case, we're going to go ahead and do it. We're going to pull it out, see what we got. As we talked in the last video, be aware to rebuild this engine, just parts only, is about $5,000. That's parts only. And a reman engine is about $8,000 with a warranty. That's not including all the hoses we got to replace. That's not including if we need control arms, which we probably do. And anything else that could be worn out. That's not even getting into electronic issues yet that these cars will have. As we see, the seat occupancy sensor is already on. I don't see much of anything else. I think overall it's pretty good shape as far as that goes. We shouldn't need any ECU cloning stuff. We shouldn't have any major issue. There's no big failures of any components that we can see so far. So we should be able to get the motor mechanicals done to it, put back in. We should be able to get it back up online, everything functioning correctly. It should be a fairly reliable car, but we all know, no matter if it's E70, E60, E61, any of that stuff, E71, we all know the gremlins will come out and get your ass real quick on these. And it's just a car you can't really turn your back on. You never know when it's going to act up. You never know what's going to have an issue. Go into safe mode. The transmission won't go into park or into drive and start with all that crap. If you have the tools to sort that out, it's not really a big deal. If you don't, it's a big deal. So I guess the moral of today's video is be careful about just buying one of these for a cheap price unless you know a lot about them. They're not a bad car. They're definitely not the best cars ever made, that's for sure. But if you have a little free time, you want to mess with stuff, and you like the look of the vehicle, and you like this engine, then it's definitely a good, we'll call it I'm not going to call it a starter engine. It's fairly complex, but not E60 M5 complex. So that's going to be it, guys. Thanks for watching. See you later.